Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Oxford Business Leaders, and today's education slot is done by Dominic Marlow, who's an extremely experienced and very competent business broker. I've known him for about 12 years and he's done some amazing stuff for the businesses I've introduced. So Dominic, welcome. You're going to cover today 10 top opportunities when selling a business. I would have thought you could have managed to delete key on your first slide, but never mind about that. Okay, right, Dominic, off you go. Do share with us your wisdom, and then we'll come back with questions afterwards.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Alan. So there's a lot of relevance here to everyone that's either in a business or working with other business owners. So don't think about this in the wider sense. My down key is not working. There we go. So just a tiny bit about me as to the different angle that I've come from it. So I worked for GKN and Nielsen and Britvic for many years. I decided I wanted to be a little bit more self-sufficient. I spent thousands of pounds and years trying to buy a business. And the main things I learned that in this unregulated market, the advice you get is really poor if you haven't got £5 million to spend. None of the decent advisors are really interested in small businesses. But the big thing that they're missing, I'm going to be rude about accountants here as well, is that they really don't understand the human side. They don't understand the emotions and the fact that this might be your family business and that you're going to be immersed in it every single day. And a lot of advisors will try and sell businesses, and this is entirely appropriate further up the food chain. They do depend on the P&L and the balance sheet. Small business has got nothing to do with the P&L and the balance sheet if you want to acquire it. Because if it isn't the right business, it doesn't matter what the P&L and the balance sheet say, it's still not the right business. So I went to the States and trained where it is a regulated industry. That was nearly 15 years ago. I've probably done over 200 deals and a lot of exit advice and a lot of failed deals in there. And it's the things that you fail on that are actually the most important learnings. So what are these top 10 fails? There's a little bit of sarcasm and cynicism here. And the main headline is around preparation. It's all about preparation. But preparation is not one thing. It's hundreds and hundreds of different things. So there's not being prepared and being unprepared. They're completely different. Being inadequately prepared, we often see doing no preparation. The biggest danger zone here is actually number 7, it's relying on somebody else's preparation. So I've termed that, it's also poor advice. There are a lot of really poor advisors out there. And one of the main things that these poor advisors miss on is how the expectation things work. What are you actually trying to achieve and why? And what does it mean to you? And are you aware you're not going to get 100% of the cash on completion, and you might have to work for somebody else for a couple of years, and they might introduce strategies that you fundamentally disagree with and that kind of thing. So it's all these really emotional things that actually underpin this. There are two words that I like to use. Anybody that stalks me on LinkedIn will see I wrote a short article last week on hope and denial, two overused business strategies. And they really are dangerous, especially in combination. This is the plan that we probably see an awful lot of people use. It's one of my favorite slides. It's the 90-day Think About It program. And if you think about something for 90 days without any action, you are guaranteed results. Unfortunately, the guaranteed result is no change. And we see a number of people who constantly talk about doing stuff, but never actually do something. There we go. That's the quickest 10 minutes you've ever had. Any questions? Okay, that was slightly cynical. So yes, there is a little bit more to this. Hope, denial, and greed, I'd also add in there. With being even more cynical, I'd probably add ignorance in there. And this is ignorance as in not knowing stuff rather than being deliberately obtuse. A lot of people, if I were to stereotype badly here, a lot of people in our target market here are male, stale, and pale, and they think they know everything. So they have a level of ignorance. It's unconscious incompetence. They don't know. There's a lot that they don't know. They think they know everything. So in an ideal world, to do this preparation and uncover all these bits, you need 5 years. 2 to plan and refine, 1 to execute and prove the plan, 1 to sell. It's typically a 6 to 9 month process, but we'll call it 1, otherwise it doesn't add up to 5 years. And then if you're lucky and you've done all the other bits well, you'll be completely absolved of all your responsibilities and liabilities in about a year. It's really, really unusual to get 100% on completion. There will always be some kind of warranty claim or retention clause or deferred or earn out. The big difference you can make by planning this correctly is to reduce that term. If you're a good business but you're unprepared, you're still only going to get 20, 30, 40% on completion, and the rest will be hung over 3 or 4 or 5 years. And by that point, everybody would have got bored and hated each other, and it would have fallen apart nicely. So what is the real top 10? It's about valuation, but more importantly, it's about expectations and does this fit in with a plan? I love IFAs because IFAs see the world before the business, during the exit, and the life after the business. And if a business owner is reliant on a lump from the business sale, then they really have to understand what that looks like. Critical to this, good up-to-date management information. What does the business really look like? And have somebody else do that for you, a good accountant like Alan. Not that he's an accountant anymore, but that really is critical. If you can't demonstrate what the business does and update that every single month, you're just going to face more and more questions. One of my cliches is don't give people the opportunity to ask stupid questions. We want good questions about the prospect and where it's going, not stupid questions about why have you done this or why don't those add up. Think about the buyer or the compelling true story. This is really important. People say, does it matter? Well, yes, it does, because everything you talk about during this process has to add up. And if it doesn't, there'll just be questions raised. And that's why the buyer is important. Who might buy this business and why? And then be attractive to them. Metaphorically, literally, go to the other side of the street, see what you like, see what you don't like. Make sure you understand the likely structure, its implications, the financial implications, the human. Are you going to lose control? What's going to happen? Are you going to lose your complete freedom to take every Wednesday afternoon off to watch your kids play sport? And be buyer ready. Negotiate wisely is really, really important. The best buyer is often not the highest valuation. It's the one likely to get furthest towards the end, because anecdotally, at least 50% of deals don't get all the way to the end. So your goal is not necessarily to get all the way to the end, it's to get to the best acceptable result. And time it right and be able to prove your strategy. So all of these things sit under preparation. So I've got 3 things that buyers are mainly concerned about. It's reliance on the principal or a small number of key people. What does that actually mean? There's no systems, there's no processes, and there's no genuine leadership team. So nobody is going to give anyone a lot of money for a business, so they have no compulsion to come back tomorrow, and then they've got a business they don't know how to run. Yes, I've clocked that. Thank you, Alan. Was that 3 or 2?
3.
3? Okay, that's perfect. I've got loads of time. You have to be able to prove that you're sustainable in your revenue and profits. What does that really look like? You've got no or poor financial management systems. That doesn't mean you have to use a complicated function, but just be aware of what this means. Where's your revenue coming from? What does your cash flow look like? What are your forecasts? And then the big one for the doom mongers is around potential liabilities. Don't have loads of stuff on your balance sheet that you shouldn't have. I'm just looking at a company that's got tens of thousands of pounds of gardening work on their P&L, which has gone into the balance sheet as leasehold improvements. That they're in a serviced office. 3 other things for the buyer to look out for, and these are really, really important. Make sure it's someone that you think you can deal with. It helps if you like each other, but you have to have a mutual respect. You want to be able to work together, have similar morals and ethics. The objectives have to be aligned, really aligned, and they have to be truly mutually beneficial. And this can be tricky where somebody's buying and somebody's selling, because your core objective, best price, lowest price, isn't going to happen. So focus on other things that are important. And then between you, you have to make sure that you've got the resources to deliver your plan. So if they're going to take your business to the States and they're reliant on that to make it work, prove it. Show me who you're going to talk to in the States. How are you going to do that? How are you going to improve my product? Where are you going to take it? What are you going to do with it? And I've alluded to a couple of these things already. There are 3 really important points here, and it is 1, 3, and 2. What are you getting the day you sign the contract? And then the end bit is, what are you aiming for? And the important bit is, how do you get between the first bit and the last bit? And you can really shrink that down to less time and fewer conditions if you plan properly. Another one of my favorite cliches: surprises are a bad thing. If you tell somebody that you make $500,000 a year, and then when you show them your accounts, you're showing 600,000 a year, it's not a good thing. It just shows you don't know your numbers. And if you've got that wrong, they're going to assume you've got everything else wrong as well. And that really is it.
Lovely. Brilliant. Okay, peeps, any questions or comments?
Go for it, Stephen.
Just a minute, let's stop you sharing your screen, and then I can see everyone. Okay, you're still on record, people, because the questions are sometimes some of the most important bits. Okay, fire away. Steve Baker.
Yeah, okay, thank you. It was really interesting. I'm glad you like IFAs, because we are wonderful people.
You are wonderful people.
Do you work in all sectors, or do you specialise in a particular sector where you will arrange the sale of businesses?
The specialism is, accountants are wonderful people, yes, Alan. The specialism is more around the owner operated, because that's the area that a lot of the bigger players really don't understand. Mm-hmm. We are quite mainstream. A good analogy would be, think about the industrial estate on the outskirts of town, not the business park, but the industrial estate. All those relatively simple businesses that do something, the distributors, the wholesalers, the manufacturers, the service industries that are typically 1 to 10 million, but with 1 or 2 key people who are also the key financial stakeholders.
Is there sorry, I do apologise. Is there, you mentioned that the turnover there, is there a minimum business turnover that you would want to see before you'd get involved in the transaction?
In practice, yes, but in theory, no. If it's profitable and sellable and there's enough money in it for everyone, i.e. we can achieve the vendor's goals and we think we can get somebody else to pay the price and there's enough money to pay all the deal fees in the middle, we'll look at virtually anything. The smallest business I've successfully sold turned over £110,000. Alan actually introduced them to me.
Oh, right.
You probably don't remember who it is. I can't remember his name, but I know it was an asbestos business.
I certainly don't remember the commission.
That's because you were a regulated accounnt at the time and not able to.
So I was.
Who pays your fee, Dominic? Is it the vendor or the seller? The buyer, rather.
I would argue that actually the deal pays the fee, and if the fee is an issue, then it's not the right deal. So if you imagine a transaction price of £1 million with 50,000 deal fees, the buyer pays £1 million and the vendor receives 950. So who pays? The buyer could pay 950 and pay my deal fees, but I'm typically engaged by the vendor. So the deal fees, and our lovely solicitors amongst us as well will take their share out of that, and anybody else like the taxes.
We haven't got many by solicitor. We've got Harriet, but thank you. That was good. Thank you.
And David Parry as well, who's probably involved in a lot of buy and sell, TUPE and all that sort of stuff. Chris, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm trying to mute myself. Oh, wow. Hello, Dominic. Nice to see you again.
It's been a while.
Yes, long time. Yes. Was it Freeland, wasn't it? The Freeland meeting. Just interested, what type of business are you working on at the moment, Dominic, and how did you come across them? What sort of deal are you working on now?
Okay, so a couple of good examples. I'm dealing with a low-code business, a business that turns Excel, complicated Excel legacy spreadsheets into enterprise-grade apps. That will probably get bought by a private equity type firm. I'm dealing with a service business that looks after the e-commerce community for things like web management and load testing. So that's in a really, really hot space at the moment. I've got a very nice home improvement business that was introduced to me by their lovely accountant. I love accountants. They're wonderful people. Aren't they, Alan? The majority of the work that I get, because I saw your question flash up, is referred to me by people like typically accountants, IFAs, and any service provider to a small business. So any coach, mentor, anything like that. And it's a really, really good indicator to me that a small business owner is taking external advice, because it means that they're biddable and they don't believe they know everything.
Is Alan Kennedy paying for all these compliments?
Yes, he's lovely. He's wonderful. Accountants are great.
Yeah. If he is paying, Stephen, it won't be a lot of money, mate. I can tell you.
No, I'm sure. I think Alan and I love each other dearly, and we have done some good stuff together, and I hope we continue to do so.
David Parry.
Dominic, do you act as a broker? If a business owner comes to you and says, look, I want to sell, but I have no idea where to start, do you sort of point them in the right direction, or?
Yeah, so I spend the majority of my time actually executing sale mandates. What I would like to do, and there's a problem here to do again with the level of preparation and the target market, is have more of these people 3 to 5 years out, where we're working on a light long-term exit strategy, and we're solving some of those institutionalized problems, which are predominantly leadership team and systems and processes and governance. Because if you haven't got those, you're screwed, aren't you, Val?
Absolutely. I've got a question, Dominic. Is that all right? Am I jumping the queue or anything?
No, you go ahead, Val.
So, Dominic, you'll be pleased to hear that we were almost textbook. 5 years, lots of preparation, implementation, and then we're now in the integration phase. So, but we also had to develop the optimum solution, and that was in our case, employee ownership. So my question is, can you give an example of the worst outcome and then the best outcome? So something that comes to mind, that something worked really well and then something that really did not work well. And what are the reasons for that?
How long do we have, Alan?
We're okay for time.
Okay. Yeah. So a nice example involving an IFA which had a brilliant outcome. There was a chap who had a really nice cabling business. They did structural cabling, so big cabling jobs on big buildings for your IT, your security, all your electrics, and that kind of stuff. And he'd been mumbling about retiring for a while, and he went to see his IFA and says, "Great news! My neighbour on the industrial estate has offered me 50 grand for the business." And the IFA looked at him and he said, "Are you sure it's not worth a little bit more than that?" He said, "I don't care. I just want to retire." So anyway, they went through the numbers and they thought, right, it's just worth you having a conversation. And he introduced him to me. And 6 months later, we sold that business for 450,000 with about 90% cash. So really nice outcome, because somebody had asked the right questions. Why don't you just explore this? And it costs nothing to explore. But the problem is, and there's another really good learning here, the problem is too many people come to this too late and they only have one option, which is to exit. If you do the 5-year process and the kind of thing that you did, Val, really, really well, selling might not be the best option. And I'm very comfortable with that if I've worked with them for 3 or 5 years beforehand. It could be an MBO. It could be that they go part-time and put a proper board in and then they keep the company, or stick it in a trust for their kids, or they can do whatever. So one way of looking at this is that if you do all this preparation, you will have many more options and you can work on a want basis rather than a need basis. Disastrous outcome. I sold a really nice business introduced to me by their virtual finance director. It's about 5 million turnover. It imported products that virtually all of you will have, things like cigarette lighters and barbecue lighters. And we had a great deal on the table, but there was just a little bit of hesitation around the buyer, and we didn't realize these queues long enough. And they came up with quite an innovative deal structure, about half the consideration on completion, and then the rest spread over 2 years. Now, actually, in hindsight, the vendor was quite happy with the half that he got, but obviously he would have liked a little bit more. He never got the rest of the money. And the reason he never got the rest of the money was because he used a cheap solicitor who didn't do their job very well. And when you've got a lot of money that's outstanding, it was about 450,000 was outstanding. At some point, the buyer will look at it and say, what if I can get out of paying that? Can you just have a quick look at this and see if we can get out of this easily? And they ended up, it was a really simple trick, a really scurrilous trick. They put the buying vehicle into liquidation. So the seller had no recourse.
And could I ask, as a corollary to that, if that's the kind of person running the business, were the employees still there after a while?
In this case, the deal involved a relocation from somewhere near London to up north, which is why it was a good deal, because they took a vast amount of money out the overhead straight away, because they were importing and distributing similar products to largely the same community.
Yeah. So the employees were losing their jobs anyway.
Yes, yes. Now, ironically, yes, very well said, David. This is about maximizing the benefit between cost and protection, not anything else. Don't use a solicitor who handled your divorce or you play golf with. Well, you could do, but a more important factor is whether or not they are familiar with the nuances of small business transfer.
How could you prevent the sale of the purchasing vehicle? Or mitigate the results of doing that?
Do we have a solicitor in the room so that we can get a regulated answer?
David?
You need a contract to tie them up in knots, wouldn't you? So what stitch them up.
What you don't want to do is spend £50,000 on a deal worth 200,000. But what you can do is just make sure that you choose the right people and you choose the right plan, and you have the resources between you, so there is a mutual benefit. The obvious answer is you get a PG in place, which very few people would sign as a buyer anyway, and most solicitors would not advise their client to sign a PG. But you can have other clauses in there about what you can and can't do during this period, which, if they all make sense and add to the achievement of the mutual objectives, the buyer is likely to agree to. Because if he says, I ain't doing that, he's basically telling you that's what he's going to do.
David, any comment on that?
No, I couldn't add much more to that other than make sure your disclosure letter is absolutely watertight. And for those who don't know, that's when you're selling the business. That's the warts and all bit. You know?
Yep.
Buyer beware.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Which is why the governance piece is critical. Don't give them easy options to ask stupid questions.
Yeah. Okay.
Why have you got a llama on your balance sheet?
Yes. Okay. Right. Thank you, Dominic. I think that's probably worth a round of applause, actually. So.